I'm Jessica Chen with GNS Business Communications, and I'm here with my colleague, Suman Ali. We're here to celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We're talking today about our experiences as first generation Americans. Hi, Suman.
Hi, Jess. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Same here. So, Suman, tell me a little bit about your experience being raised in the States and a little bit about your family's background.
Sure, I'll start with my family. So, my parents immigrated here from Pakistan about 25 years ago, and they actually got married here. So, my mom came because her entire family, brother, sisters, parents, all came here. So, she kind of did not have a choice. My dad came here looking for jobs, not trying to get married, which is ironic because he got married shortly after getting here. So, I grew up in upstate New York, and yeah, I think Pakistani culture was definitely a very big part of my life growing up. My parents wanted to make sure that we understood that we were Pakistani before we were American. I actually learned Urdu before I learned English because my parents didn't really speak much of it at home. So before we started school at home, even with my siblings, I spoke mostly Urdu, which was funny because now we cannot even imagine speaking Urdu to each other. We only speak to each other in English. Um, but it's definitely helpful. I don't think I would have learned it or retained it as much if I didn't speak it so often at home. But it was definitely a unique experience because I had all of my cousins and family, but I didn't have a lot of friends that were Pakistani. So you definitely felt like there was a divide between who I was when I was at school and with friends versus who I was at home. How about you? What was your experience like?
Yeah, so my parents had immigrated to the States from Taiwan. Both my parents had met in Taiwan previously, but then came over here to pursue graduate school. So my dad went to graduate school on Long Island in New York, and my mom was actually down in Austin, Texas. But after grad school, my mom went back up to meet my dad on Long Island, and that's where I was born. And I spent most of my childhood being raised in New Jersey in a suburban town in New Jersey. And it's interesting, Suman, that you talked about just growing up and learning Urdu at home. And obviously, with my parents, I was raised in speaking Chinese at home, but also English as well. So, much to my parents' dismay, they always told me, this is the time to learn Chinese, to speak it at home. This is like a great opportunity to get really fluent. So my parents many times would speak to me in Chinese, and then I would respond back to them in English. So my hearing is definitely better than my speaking, but really did appreciate that experience of learning it in the household. And growing up, I did go to Chinese school. So I went through Chinese school through kindergarten to high school. And basically every Sunday would take classes learning the Chinese language, how to write, even taking culture classes. So I did Chinese fan dancing to also doing classes with Chinese nodding. And it was really interesting having that experience. And I think at the time when I was younger, I just did not want to wake up early on Sunday mornings. And I thought to myself, I already go to school Monday through Friday. I don't want to wake up early and do another set of classes on Sunday. But looking back, I am grateful to have had that experience and to have been in an environment where I was with other people that shared a similar cultural background. So, very fortunate that I was able to experience that. And I know, Suman, when we had talked, we also discussed um, the first generation American experience and how to kind of balance our cultural background and how to also balance that with the mainstream American culture. So, kind of has your experience been with balancing the two?
It's hard. I mean, I think definitely growing up, being like the only Pakistani person in your class, or even just I think anyone diverse when you're in a group of like white people, it's kind of hard to want to stick out. So you very much like I did not want to, and I was not very appreciative of my culture maybe until I got to college. So it wasn't even that long ago. Um, but since then, I think that I embrace it a lot more and I'm a lot more open with it. Like I'm sure like at some point I probably would have never gone out in public and spoke Urdu because, it makes you stick out when you don't want to, when you're not already in a diverse group of people. What
Yeah,
about you?
I think a lot of first generation Americans do struggle with that, the balance of assimilating to that mainstream American culture and, a lot of us probably tried to hide parts of our cultural background when we were growing up. So I think it can be a struggle at times, especially when people in this country sometimes look at my face or your face and don't consider us 100% American, even though we were born here. And sometimes when I think when we go visit, our families' home countries, and we're sometimes not 100% accepted there. And when I go visit my extended family in Taiwan, when I'm there and speaking Chinese, the locals immediately know I'm American. They can distinguish that thick American accent. I'm sure when I'm just walking and approaching them, just kind of the demeanor, it's just a little different that they can recognize that you're not from there as well. So you sometimes can think to yourself, how do I strike that balance and where do I truly belong? And do you feel sometimes countryless? Where do I come from? Is it, am I tied to this one country or tied to my parents' home country? Or is it really both, and how to incorporate both of those cultures together?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting about the assimilating because no one else who is very clearly American has to even think about, oh, I was born in this country, I need to assimilate here. But I think it's a very unique experience for first generation Americans, especially who are trying to figure out how they can balance both and really appreciate both while not losing anything. Because I mean, I anticipate that with each generation, we become a little more American unless we actively try to preserve our ethnicities.
Yeah, and I think that is important, like you said, to you know keep that ethnic culture, that culture from your families, to make sure that's still passed down from generation to generation. Obviously, there is the mainstream American culture that is still part of us because we are Americans, but to still hold on to those important pieces of our family's home culture.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I know a really big part about our culture is our ethnicities are our names.
Yeah.
So, do you want to tell us about your Chinese name and your experience
Yeah.
with that?
So with our culture, we all have Chinese names. It's interesting because it's not just, a first name and a last name. Um, in Chinese, you use Chinese culture or characters, I should say. And the last name is your family surname. So that's kind of the first character of your name. And to my extended family, they all know me by my Chinese name. But obviously, when I'm here in the States, I go by Jess or Jessica. And it is interesting for first generation Americans and generations beyond of just thinking about whether they're giving their children traditional American names or English versions of their names in the mother tongue language. So I know some people even choose to keep their, you know, name in their mother tongue language as their legal name, but they often adopt an American English name as well. And that's typically sometimes made so other people can pronounce it a little easier. And people should do whatever makes them what they're comfortable with. And my advice would just be for others, if there is a name of an individual that you're unfamiliar with, is just to ask them how to correctly pronounce it and really learn how it's pronounced and said. And it may be awkward just to ask someone, I don't know how to pronounce your name, and admit that, and how do you pronounce it? But I do think it's truly necessary for you to really value someone because that name is so tied to your identity. What about you, Simon?
I've actually always had a really unique experience with my name. So, my name is actually pronounced Suman, but at home, my parents and my family have a nickname for me, so they never really call me Suman either. It's usually just at work or before when I was in school, so I was very used to being called Suman. Um, but it's something that I've always considered, like maybe I should go back to the way my name is actually pronounced. Um, Something I haven't decided yet. I feel like it's a really big change because, I mean, since the time I was 4, I've been called Suman by so many people. But it's also interesting because, so my full name is Suman Ali. So a lot of people will see my last name when I send an email and think like, oh, like that is her first name. So I've received countless emails being like, hi, Ali. Or I'm sure they're saying like Ali. And it took me a really long time to be like, okay, I need to correct them. Like before, I would let it go on for a little bit because it just feels so awkward to be
Yeah.
like, oh, by the way, my name is Suman, not Ali. Um,
And I think it
and
is important for us to correct them at the moment it's wrong, because once it carries on, it becomes more awkward. And
yeah,
because they
after like,
really think that that's the way to pronounce it.
I know, after like 3 emails, I'm like, should I correct them at this point? Like, I don't know. It's just gone on too long.
Yeah, yeah,
Just accept the fate. But I'm getting better at it. But it's so awkward and it shouldn't be.
yeah.
But
I think that's just part of trying to truly get to know someone, and to get over that. It is that hump of awkwardness, but to really make that connection with someone, that's part of it. To really know someone's name and to pronounce it in the right way and pronounce it correctly.
yeah, I have my little tagline now. I'm like, actually, that's my last name. My first name's Suman. End it with
Yeah.
a smiley face.
Yes. There you go.
Yeah. So another thing we've talked about with identities is a question we get a lot is people asking, where are you from? Because we clearly do not look like we're from America, even though we were born here, raised here. Um, so it's a question we get a lot of, where are you from, when people are really trying to ask, what is your ethnicity? What has your experience been with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can speak for a lot of us, especially us too, because we've talked about it before, is that the where are you from question is a question that a lot of people within diverse communities and within the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, we often are on the receiving end of. And I think a lot of times when we get that question, the person that's asking it, there could be that genuine interest in what our background is and where our families come from. But when we are asked, where are you from? It sort of implies that, hey, where are you from? You aren't from here. You're not from the US. And that does kind of take you aback and thinking, this person doesn't think I belong here or I'm from here, even though I am. And so it is kind of startling sometimes because it usually happens and it is asked by someone that I don't know. It could be a random person off the street, or if I'm in the grocery store, someone trying to make conversation. So it's usually asked by someone who I don't have any previous contact with. And sometimes when people ask that, I think the worst kind of scenarios are too is not only where they ask where you're from, but preface in front of that your English is good. So they really want to know, how is your English so good, even though it looks like you're not from here. So I think at times the intent there is to be an icebreaker. It's to learn more about you, but I think the way it is asked could be a little bit differently, because when someone is asking that, they're really trying to figure out, what's your ethnicity, where is your family background, where does your family lineage come from, and that's a great thing to know. But I think the approach of asking a direct question, how direct the question of where are you from, can be a little bit triggering and a little direct for people like me and you who are on the receiving end. How
Yeah.
has your experience been with that?
And it's so different for us as well, because I was going to say, in New York City, so many of us are from all over the country and not specifically from one of the five boroughs. So I often will ask people, oh, like, where did you move from? Or like, where are you from? And it's very common. They'll just say, like, oh, I'm from like Kansas or somewhere else. But if I respond with, oh, I'm from upstate New York, they're like, oh, but like, where are you really from? Because that's not the
Yeah,
answer they want. They want to
right.
know, like, what is your ethnicity? Like, where did you immigrate from? Where did your parents come from? But I think it also really depends on who's asking, because um, I've had other people, like other South Asians, who will ask me, where are you from? And I think in that sense, it's really them looking for someone who they can bond with on a different level. And I know my mom is very guilty of going to the grocery store and asking anyone who looks like they might be from Pakistan or India, like, oh, are you Pakistani? And she'll start talking to them in Urdu if she can. And it's
Yeah,
mortifying still. And I tell her not to do it. But it's just like, it's like second nature. They just get excited to see someone who's like part of their community, and they just get excited about it. So I think it also really depends on like the context and who's asking. But like you're saying, a lot of people use it as an icebreaker when there's other ways that you can get to know someone other than saying, hey, where are you from?
exactly. Well, thank you so much, Suman, for chatting with me today. I think it was a great experience for us just to chat about our experiences together as first generation Americans.
Thanks, Jess. I really enjoyed talking to you today.